Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We got Zach Guggenheim back with us again after his Rose Bowl trip. Zach, I've heard that you're good luck for the Buckeyes. Will you be attending every Ohio State playoff game here in the future?
Listen, if the loyal listeners want to help fund the trip, I still can't go because I have ministry obligations. But I could be convinced possibly to be incentivized to go, but I don't think it's going to happen.
You heard it here first. Super chat it up if you want Zach to be there. Just kidding.
Please don't, because I'm not going.
We're glad to have you back, Zach. Thankful that you got to go on that trip with your mom. I know that was really special for you and her, and obviously seeing that game was very special as well. I did do a couple videos to recap that on the Ohio State side, and then I also recapped it kind of from the Oregon side. So if you want a kind of recap on that game, you can go check out those videos. They are very clearly Ohio State centric and Oregon centric. So go check those out. Zach, before we get to the show, do you want to share any thoughts on that game or your experience there or anything before we get going?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One, going to the Rose Bowl, it's a pricey trip,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
but if you ever if you ever have a chance to go, do it because it's the best experience from pregame to postgame. The greatest football experience I have ever been a part of. And that's not just because Ohio State beat Oregon. It's just they do such a good job of knowing college football and their traditions. And so you're doing hang on Sloopy and then you're doing shout. So you're doing Ohio State's tradition, you're doing Oregon's traditions. You're seeing both bands. The B2 bomber flying over the stadium. It's freaking awesome. Like, and then seeing the sunset over the San Gabriel Mountains. I mean, that honestly, that may have been my favorite part. Not like the game was awesome, but just seeing the sunset on the San Gabriel Mountains, there's nothing like it. Everybody talked it up, and I'm like, it can't be this good. It's better. It
Mm.
There's not a bad seat in the house. It's oh, it's awesome. Like it is the best experience for a college football fan. So that's one. The other thing I'll say is I think there are a lot of hot takes about the layoff. And that was a key to this for me. I thought that the layoff would be tough for Oregon. This wasn't just because of the layoff. Like I thought Ohio State was just they've leveled up. And Oregon, I think it's a credit to Oregon that Dylan Gabriel battled as much as he did because some of those plays, it was escaping sacks to get those third downs and fourth down conversions. And it's why, when we talk about the game later, I just have a lot of skepticism with Texas being able to really move the ball well because I thought Dylan Gabriel, though he's not the best NFL prospect, his escapability and ability to create on the move, I thought actually gave Oregon a chance. And it was their only chance. And I'm just not sure what offense that's left in the field that's going to be able to do much against this defense the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, I have thoughts on that, and I will save those for the preview because we're going to get that at the end of the episode. We will preview the Ohio State and Texas game coming up here at the end of the episode. Before we do that, the second to last topic of the episode will be the Tex or the Penn State Notre Dame game. Our first thing we're going to get to is the bowl games. We're going to talk about those, not do an in-depth recap of each one, but just kind of talk about what happened because I'm noticing on a lot of other channels, people don't watch full recaps of these games, which tells me that you guys don't care to see a full recap, which is fine. I don't care. But I do think there are some of these games, particularly Brett Bielema, that were so much fun that I have to get Zach's take on. So
Yeah.
before we do that, Zach, let's go ahead and see who is here in the chat, and then we'll get going. We got Dave here. He says Mayo and Skyuma also Skull Vikings. Yes, the Mayo was fantastic. I tweeted it out. PJ Fleck is just perfect for college football, man. I
Yeah.
mean, Everything about him, I love it. I love the mayo and everything. It's fantastic. Fantastic. John says, I have many IU agendas to push this offseason depending on how the rest of the postseason goes. John, I can't tell you how many times I have wanted to tweet something about Indiana, and then I'm like, I've probably talked about them too much at this point. Like, I think I tweet more about Indiana than I do about Ohio State on my personal account at this point. So it's like, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should stop. Is there ever too much Indiana, Zach?
I think sometimes Kurt Signetti can be a little much. I'll be honest, but
The we destroy top 25 teams was a little much.
Yeah, it's a little much. A little much. Tone it down. Be truthful. Be truthful, Kurt. Be truthful.
You have one flaw, Kurt. That's it. That's your only flaw. You got Dave saying it's great if you're not Oregon. I think he's talking about the Rose Bowl. So
yeah,
that was a tough one for Oregon fans. I think I cheered him up a little bit with my recap video.
But, I will say this: the Oregon fans that were there until the fourth, like they got back into it, and like there was some fear and trembling on the Ohio State for the Ohio State fans when they made it 34-15. So
I heard the stadium get louder when they scored in the second half. I thought, wow, okay, they got some momentum now.
Yeah, Oregon fans bring it, man. Like they are loud and proud, and there's a little concern. And then Travion Henderson's like, nah. Jeremiah Smith, nah.
Yeah, I mean, and Ohio State's offense went 3 and out that next one. It was really the defense that stopped Oregon there. So, yeah. PSU Jim, thanks for being here. He says beautiful out there at the Rose Bowl and everything. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And John says the atmosphere around the Rose Bowl looked gorgeous as well. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I can't imagine experiencing it in person. So, and we got Philip here. Philip says Brett Bielema made Beamer look like a little punk. Philip also says IOL, INI. There for you, Philip. So let's start there, Zach. All right, these bowl game. I put bowl game odds up there. I apologize. These are the bowl game results for the Big Ten teams. But Illinois beat South Carolina 21-17. Now I do want to clear something up. Everybody thought that Brett Bielema was taunting Shane Beamer when he did the substitution signal. That is not what was happening, and Brett Bielema has put it on record, making sure people are aware he was not taunting Shane Beamer. Long story short, that signal is done from one sideline to another, all the way up to the NFL to signal, hey, we're going to fair catch this ball. Tell your guys not to go that hard on special teams, so that way nobody gets hurt, because people oftentimes get hurt on special teams more often than any other, or kickoffs more often than any other play. So in order to limit those, the coach or the special teams coordinator, whoever, will signal to the other sideline with the T-bar to say, we're going to fair catch it or we're going to let it bounce in the end zone. Just hold off. Well, South Carolina did that. And Zach, what did they do after they did that signal? They returned the kickoff, to which an Illinois player got injured on that kickoff return. So Brett Bielema was obviously very upset by that and wanted to make sure he told Shane Beamer, I know what you did. I know the move you just pulled. You just tried to pull one over on us, and it resulted in one of my players getting hurt. Just absolutely crazy. What are your thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, there was a bit of gamesmanship throughout this game. I mean, I think that obviously was one. Brett Bielema all game was slow substituting, which I felt like was a little much, but it's like, if the refs are letting them get away with it, do it. And until they tell you to stop, like, I think in the spirit of sportsmanship, I wouldn't have done that. But the reality is Illinois was a 9.5 point underdog. And I think what Illinois has done all year, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to Illinois, but South Carolina had a little bit more talent on the roster, but I think there was gamesmanship going on. And I think Brett Bielema got into Shane Beamer's head, and I think Beamer was trying to get back at it. And the reality is, when you respond like he did, both with his play calling, not just play calling, but like his decisions and deception, but then also his antics. Like you get somebody on tilt, and all of a sudden, like Illinois just controlled the game at that point. They controlled the game. They were in Shane Beamer's head, and it was so clear. And like Illinois, we've been saying it all year. Brett Bielema is the most underrated coach in the country. And that's what we saw in this game. He's the most underrated coach in the country. And conversely, South Carolina was not a playoff team. You're muted, JR. With that, though,
I was going to say they're one of the most overrated teams in the country. So much so that a pair, and I talked about this in the most recent SEC video I did, a pair of podcasters, and Ari Wasserman and Andy Staples, have ranked South Carolina number 7 in their top 10 for next year. Did you see that, Zach?
I can understand it because I think Sellers is going to be really good, and their defensive line is going to be really good.
7th though.
Well, yeah, and I'm not. Yeah, that's dumb. It's dumb.
I understand having them ranked. Like I understand the potential. They had a really young, good defensive line. Like they are one that I could understand having them that high, or like having them high in the rankings. But 7th, like to me, I saw that and I was like, yep, SEC bias is still here. And Florida was 9th, and Auburn was 10th. Like at this point, I just have to laugh at how terrible that is.
Yeah. And Ari's one of the good guys too. Like he doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been trying to go against the SEC, but it's
sometimes he fails.
Sometimes we all fail. It's okay. But
to your point, like South Carolina was obviously the more talented team in that game, and I just thought that spoke to the Big Ten and how the Big Ten, is a conference that they don't get the recruiting rankings that the Big Ten does or the SEC does. But this is why the Big Ten has the potential to be so much better of a conference over the SEC, is that you have so much better coaching. You have a young coach in Shane Beamer who obviously cannot control his emotions and has no idea how to not let another opposing coach get in his head and adjust. And Brett Bielema just made him look like a child on the sidelines, to be honest. It was quite embarrassing for Shane Beamer and Brett Bielema. You walk away from that game like the old Wiley vet took the boy down.
Yep. So. Yeah. I'll say this last thing. Two things. One, Illinois gets to 10 wins. Like, that is a significant accomplishment for Illinois.
Huge.
And two, and Philip saying it in the chat, next year is going to be awesome for Illinois. Playoff contender contender for Illinois next year.
They have something like 18 starters returning or something like that. So this is a whole lot of great momentum for them in their program.
Yeah. And they got one of my underrated guys in the transfer portal as a replacement for Pat Bryant. It's beautiful.
There we go. We'll get to the underrated guys next. Yes, we are going to do 10 underrated players out of the Big Ten transfer portal after this. So stick with us even through the bowl game discussion here. Zach, let's hit on maybe another one or two. If anybody in the chat has something you want to hit on from the bowl games. I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about the game because Minnesota was obviously the better team, but we can talk about the game if you'd like. Or we just talk about PJ Fleck getting mayo poured on himself. I was equally entertained by both of them. Okay, that was a lie. I was more entertained by PJ Fleck.
Well, I think I think this is probably true with a few of these teams. The games mattered, but the narratives matter more. Mm-hmm. And I think Minnesota is one of those because I think if you talked, we talked about Minnesota coming around midway through the year, and we're talking about how disappointing the season was turning out, right? They were 3-3. They had lost to UNC, barely lost to Michigan. And you're like, man, PJ Fleck, you know me. I was on the fire PJ Fleck, fire Mike Locksley train. Still on the fire Mike Locksley train.
One of those was a good take.
Yeah. I have a new coach though for my top 2 hot seat guys, which we'll talk about later. PJ Fleck has changed. And I think that's my biggest takeaway, not just with the bowl game, but with the end of the season, is he adapted to his personnel and the team really bought in. And I think I said it on this show as well as my own. Minnesota was my big lock. I'm like, I don't know about some of these other Big Ten teams. Minnesota's going to win, and it's going to be easy. And that's what it was. It
It
was
was
easy.
destiny. It was
Yeah.
destiny. PJ
Well,
Fleck and Mayo, it's destiny. You just
yeah.
know what's going to happen. Also,
Well,
Virginia Tech.
yeah, they're bad. But the thing is, a year ago, Minnesota's 5-7, and they're kind of they were like a Virginia Tech. And
Yeah.
I'm like, they are a level or two above them. And I think that speaks actually to how PJ Fleck has elevated this program. And I think that's a big deal.
I agree. I agree. Dave has some good insight here. He says, I like the play of our young wide receivers. We didn't have our biggest weapon, and we still dominated the air. I mean, a lot of that is Max Brosmer. I mean, I've said I said it once, and I'll say it again. I wish we would have got him for more than one season. I mean, it was really really cool to see him play this season. Really good stuff. But also, and I'll get to it when I talk about my underrated guys. Like Minnesota's kind of on a hot streak right now, developing wide receivers. Daniel Jackson, he's going to get drafted. I do believe, and I think they've done a good job with some of their other younger wide receivers. So we'll be sure to talk about that and everything. But the other one people are talking about in the chat, Zach, is Rutgers. Rutgers blew their bowl game. I think they were up by like 17 or 10 points or something like that at one point. That was a tough one. What were your thoughts there?
I felt like it was a classic game. Like it was classic. Rutgers got up to a big lead because they found something, but then Rutgers talent or Kansas State's talent took over. Like Dylan Edwards. Was it Dylan Edwards? Is that the back for Kansas State that went off? I forget who the running back is, but he had close to 200 yards. He was, I think, averaging over 10 or 11 yards a carry. And I I I I am very hesitant to put blame on Rutgers because I think Kansas State is just a really actually is a pretty talented team. And I think honestly, what the top 4 or 5 teams of the Big 12 proved is that they didn't necessarily have an elite team, but they had 4 or 5 really solid teams at the top. Unlike the ACC, who sucks. The ACC is bad. I think I got those flip flopped. I thought the Big 12 was really bad and the ACC was decent at the top. I think we flip flopped them. BYU is really good. I think Arizona State proved that they belonged in the playoff. And I think Kansas State, lost to a lot of those teams, but they have guys, they have dudes, and Rutgers is just not there yet. And so I give them a lot of credit for getting up like big, but I think they ran out of gas.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this issue a couple times this season, right? We saw it with Washington; they almost blew that game, and then there was another game earlier in the season. What was it? Was it Virginia Tech? Where they almost blew that one as well, and thankfully mistakes by the other team. But yeah, this was a Kansas State team that didn't make those mistakes, and they were able to come back. I, you know, Dave is saying that the Greek Knight, I think he obviously he's talking about Athan Kaliakmanis is the Greek gopher. He's not that good of a quarterback. I just think that they relied on Athan Kaliakmanis too much, right? Like you didn't bring Athan Kaliakmanis in to be this amazing quarterback who was going to save the day for you. You brought him in as a quarterback that Kirk Soraka was comfortable with and he was going to work well with, and he'd be able to manage the offense because he knew the offense well. Well, when you had the injuries to the running back position and everything else, I think Kaliakmanis had to turn into a much bigger weapon on the team, and he did provide at times, but Dave is right. He's not that guy. He's not going to be the reason your team wins a lot of football games and moves the ball up and down the field for you. He needs a strong running game. He needs a good running back. And unfortunately, this game he didn't have Kyle Monangai, but you really can't use that as an excuse because Rutgers, like I said, they were up by 2 or 3 scores and they shouldn't have lost that lead.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's rough.
it
I
was rough.
Real quick, can we just talk about Michigan, Alabama for a minute?
Yeah, how the SEC sucks.
Yes. By the way, Big Ten 5-1, I believe, against the SEC.
5-4 overall because Texas did beat Michigan.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Alabama
like
beat
during the regular
Wisconsin.
season, but
Yeah,
but Michigan beat Alabama, USC beat Texas A&M, USC beat LSU. There's some other ones. Obviously, Missouri beat Iowa down there. There's some other ones I can't remember all of
yeah.
them, but yeah,
But
a Big Ten is the only conference with a winning record over the SEC this season.
yeah, and in bowl games, it's been, a disaster for
Yeah,
the SEC. Um,
yeah. Phillips right. He says Big Ten 4, SEC 1 in bowl
yeah,
games. Yep.
yeah. Michigan, you know, they were playing a depleted Alabama team. Alabama had all their starters on their defensive line out. Their quarterback got it. Oh, wait, no, that's the other way around.
Yeah.
Michigan had all their defensive line out. They
If I'm
had,
an Alabama fan, I am terrified for next year.
yes.
Listen, I'm not trying to take anything away from Michigan. Michigan, they had the opportunities and they took them. But I mean, even I think Michigan fans would agree with me that there was some very poor coaching decisions made by Sharon Moore in that game. There was a timeout close to going down the halftime that allowed Alabama to have the big play that converted it, or that eventually converted into either a field goal or a touchdown. I'm having trouble remembering because it was a while back, but like, like there's coaching decisions made by Sharon Moore every now and then that's like, dude, get it together. Like you have, it's not like this is your first year coaching football. I know this is first year as a head coach, so first year making these decisions, but like you should know your team is not going to get the ball and run down the field with Davis Warren and score in 30 seconds. Why take a timeout there? Why even mess with that? Just let the clock run. I didn't understand it. I don't know what's in Sharon Moore's head sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
But
but
credit to
besides,
them, they won the game. Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I was say, but even with that, he outcoached Kalen DeBoer, which, to your point, I'm like, if I'm Alabama, I'm terrified. If I'm a Michigan fan, I'm excited because you ended your season with wins over Ohio State and Alabama.
Yes.
You went 8-5. They're probably going to be ranked at the end of the season. Like
Yeah, I would think
25,
so.
25, 24, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
They finished the season as strong as anybody in the country. And Sagarin has him 12th overall. So I think it's we love to make fun of Michigan at just being Ohio. Well, off air, we like to make fun of Michigan. On air, we are the consummate professionals, as I wear my Ohio State hoodie. But I think there is a lot of credit for Sharon Moore, even with some of the dumb decisions he made. There's a lot of credit to him for steadying the ship, and Wink, as the defensive coordinator, deserves a lot of credit too. The way that he put Jalen Milroe through a blender, and which is not the hardest thing to do, but like they still have talent. They have talent everywhere, and he got his defense ready to play. A lot of their second string being in. That's going to be a good defense again. And I think my other takeaway, Jordan Marshall, the running back, is going to be a stud, which I think we knew, but we saw it.
Yeah, we saw it. We got it confirmed. I'll say this about Michigan, and then we'll move on because we do have to get going. But Sharon Moore found the identity of this team midway through the year. Well, maybe a little bit after midway through the year. Really, that Northwestern game seemed like a turning point, but I think he had found the momentum or the identity before that. And Wink Martindale found the identity of the defense, right? Wink Martindale was blitzing so much, and it was like, dude, you don't need to do this. You have one of the best defensive lines. You have one of the best pass rushers in the nation, and Josiah Stewart. The middle of the opposing team's offensive line is collapsing every single time. Like, you don't need to do this. And eventually, Wink and Sharon Moore got away from what they were hoping this team would be, which was what Michigan was last year. And they started saying, let's play into who we are. That's what they did against Ohio State. That's what they did against Northwestern too. It's just Northwestern, gave them even more opportunities to score, and they finished those a little bit better. But that's all credit to Sharon Moore and Wink Martindale. No, not very much credit to the offensive coordinator. He didn't really find the identity.
Nope.
I think
Nope.
Sharon Moore eventually took over play calling, and that was a huge deal there.
Yep.
So
that offensive coordinator, get out of there.
Yep, and they're bringing in the North Carolina guy now, so we'll see how that goes. Chip,
Oh.
I think his name's Chip too. So
Chip versus Chip.
Yeah,
next year.
Chip rivalry. Ohio State, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
I think it's Chip Lindsay or
Yeah,
Lindsay
that sounds.
I don't know, something like that. Philip says, "Do you have a way too early Big Ten rankings tonight?" We do not tonight. That's a good idea. Let's do that for next episode. Let's do that Tuesday, Zach. How's that sound?
Let's talk about that. I won't be here Tuesday, so we'll. Sorry.
Right.
Maybe
we'll wait for Sunday then. I'll
Yeah.
find somebody else with me Tuesday or something. Yeah, it could get chippy. Good idea there.
Oh, there we go.
Good idea. That's an excellent idea, Philip. We will do that next Sunday when Zach.
That's a
and I
great
are together.
idea.
So, all right. Let's see. We might skip the other two topics just to stay on time in this, Zach. But let's talk about the 10 most underrated Big Ten transfer portal additions. Now, this is not us ranking them. This is not us saying nobody else is underrated other than these guys. These were just purely me and Zach each coming up with 5 guys in the transfer portal that we feel like have been underrated, maybe glossed over, guys that are going to be big additions for their teams next year. We believe will be big additions for their teams next year, and maybe they're just not getting the love nationally that they should get. So, Zach, I will let you go first with your first one. Who is your first underrated Big Ten transfer portal addition?
Well, I know I think both of us have this guy, but I think Ethan Owenawa from Ohio State, or going to Ohio State from Rice. He's a 3-star guy. He's not top 100 in the transfer portal, and yet you talk to certain scouts, they think he easily could have been an NFL draft pick this year. And in fact, Tom Luganbill, who, he's hit and miss, but he was shocked that he didn't go. And he said that he's the best tackle prospect by far in the portal. And knowing the needs of the Buckeyes, they just had another tackle enter the transfer portal. It fills a huge need for Ohio State, along with the other tackle they got from Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now they have bookend tackles in the portal, and that was what they needed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. He was on my list as well. Just felt like it was a really good addition for Ohio State. I would not be surprised at all if in the off, or maybe next season or something like that, we hear something where Ethan is like, it was either going to Ohio State or going to the NFL draft, and that's kind of what Will Howard has said this year, the quarterback for Ohio State. So
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if we heard something like that to that credit. My first one I'm gonna say is Tai Uyunglele. I apologize if I said that first name wrong. He is going from Arizona to Washington. Look, Washington lost a lot of guys on the defensive line this past year. Uyunglele is, and I have no idea if he's related. I think he is somehow related to the other Uyungleles, but I'm not sure. He is so versatile. He is lined up in so many different positions on the defensive line for Arizona. He's done a good job the past few years that he's been playing for them. He has experience. I think this was a great addition by Jedd Fisch. Jedd Fisch going back to Arizona, getting some more players. There's also a cornerback that we'll talk about. Well, if we have time, we'll talk about him here later on, and that they are possibly going to get coming from Arizona as well. But I just love this addition. I love it for the versatility. I love it for him being able to come in and be an experienced leader on this defensive line. When you lose that much talent that they did off their defensive line, and you also had the injuries of last year as well, not only are you bringing in a versatile guy, but you're also bringing in a guy who can start right away and give you experience as a vet. So love that.
Yeah,
Zach, who's your next one?
Big deal. I'll go to the team up north. Michigan, we were on them all this season about not getting quarterbacks. Mikey Keene, he comes from Fresno State. He's not going to be a world beater. I don't think he's going to be like even like a Will Howard, but he is the perfect bridge quarterback to Bryce Underwood. And, if Underwood struggles to grasp the offense early, Mikey Keene can kind of be there to be the guy until Bryce is ready. And that means Michigan is going to be primed next year, I think, to be in that playoff discussion. They're not going to I don't think they're going to have the same stumbles on offense like they did a year ago. They won't be super explosive with Mikey Keene, but they will be in control. And I think that's a huge deal for Michigan. And I think it's way bigger than I think people realize, because Mikey Keene would have started over all three of the guys that are at Michigan right now. And I think he's gonna keep the ship steady until Bryce is ready.
Steady till Bryce is ready. I like it. Good rhyme. Good rhyme there.
Thank you. Thank you.
I couldn't go through an entire underrated Big Ten transfer portal without mentioning Indiana. I really like the addition of Kahil Benson from Colorado to Indiana. Played at Colorado played at Indiana 2 years ago. Transferred to Colorado. Now coming back to Indiana to play again. He has had some injury issues, and that's why he hasn't always been starting. I think he started all of 2023 at Indiana, all of 2023 at Indiana, so if I get that wrong, I do apologize, but I know that was the season where he started the most. And I just think that you bringing in a guy with experience, bringing in a guy from the Power Four, we talked about it on the Penn State recap episode. What does Indiana need to bring in this transfer portal class? And I said, like, you need to bring in offensive linemen. Now, they were going after a James Madison guy who hasn't started or played much football yet, and I thought, okay, that's a good start, but you also need to go out there and get guys who have been at Power 4 programs who have faced Power 4 defensive linemen and who have that experience. Well, they went out and they got Kahil Benson, and I'm not going to use another pick on it, but they went out and got Zen Michalski from Ohio State as well, who it looks like he wasn't going to be starting this year because of what Ohio State brought into the transfer portal, but he is a player who is a veteran, who has seen playing time on a big stage at Ohio State. He did not look very good against Nebraska, but that could just be being thrown into one game. We'll see how it works out for Indiana, but I really like the addition of Kahil Benson for them.
Yeah, good pick. Good pick. I'm gonna go Justin Bowick for Illinois. 6'4" receiver, was super productive at Ball State when healthy. He only played 4 games this year, but in those 4 games, he was super productive, and he fits. He's very similar in profile to Pat Bryant. Tall, long, yards after catch, and we talked about it. 18 starters coming back. Who are the starters that aren't coming back? The receivers. And so getting a productive receiver who is big and long and maybe a matchup problem, that's a missing piece. And I think he could be that if he stays healthy for Illinois.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that pick. I will go with another offensive lineman because I love offensive line so much. I'll go with Xavier Gray from Liberty to Northwestern. Now, Gray is not going to be an NFL draft prospect. He plays either right or left tackle. He's just not good enough of a pass blocker, which is definitely something that's against him and he needs to get better at. But the dude is like 6'9", nearly 350 pounds, and he run blocks very well. And for a Northwestern team that I think David Braun is going to want to make sure they can shore up one side of their offense, bringing in a guy like Xavier Gray, who was all Conference USA honorable mention this past year, for him to come from Liberty, come from playing experience the past couple of years as well. Just such a big guy, going to be such an intimidator in the run blocking. I just really like it. I think it's a great move by David Braun, and we'll see if Xavier Gray has a good year or not, but just more so him bringing in somebody with experience, somebody who is so large to come start on that offensive line, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Good pick. I will go with another Indiana guy, and that is former Maryland running back Roman Hemby, who I feel like people have forgotten that Roman Hemby was a pretty good Big Ten back. The problem is he's played at Maryland where they had no offense. And so his stats, his production has been way down. But when he's been on a decent team with a decent offensive line, he has been effective both in the run and the pass game. And what's Indiana losing? Running backs. Justice Ellison, a senior. Tyson Lawton, senior. Those guys did some work for the Hoosiers. And so now you get a good running back who's experienced, who's played in the Big Ten, who's been part of spunky Maryland teams who have been close but not there yet. He comes in to be one of their tailbacks in that rotation, and I think it's a great pickup for them.
Sorry, my wife was texting me and I had to respond to her while I was in the middle of the podcast. My bad. No, I did hear what you said about Roman Hemby, though, and I agree. I think that was a good pickup for them. I think that's a guy with experience, and he's proven he can be a good player. He just didn't have a great year this past year, but bring him into Indiana, they can have a good year possibly with him, so I like it. My other most underrated player coming into the Big Ten, and this is where I mentioned Minnesota earlier in the wide receivers. I really like the addition of Javon Tracy. I think Javon Tracy coming in from Miami of Ohio to Minnesota, he'll be an underrated weapon for him because Malachi Coleman is coming in as kind of the big wide receiver in this class, and I think with Javon Tracy coming in, kind of being a little bit more like, oh, the Miami of Ohio guy, he really had some good games this year, and he was really able to make some noise for that Miami of Ohio team. And I think Miami of Ohio is a good program. So I think what's the guy's name? Chuck something as the coach there, and I think that he has built a good program at Miami of Ohio. So I think Javon Tracy is going to come in from a good program. He's going to be a good piece to this locker room, and I think PJ Fleck, the additions he's made, it was hard to choose one, but I wanted to make sure I got somebody from that Minnesota team or transfer portal additions, and Javon Tracy is the one that seems to be getting the least amount of talk that I think could make a name for himself next season.
Yeah, that's good. It's Chuck Martin, by the way.
Chuck Martin, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm trying. Have we done 4 each?
You have one more left.
I have one more left. Okay. Oh, which one do I pick? I'm gonna go with a guy who actually a lot of Northwestern fans are really excited they got, and it's Preston Stone from SMU. I think that pickup is big considering the context of Northwestern football over the past several years. They have risen and fallen with quarterbacks who can keep them in games and not make big mistakes. And if you look at what he did at SMU a few years ago, he was a quarterback who was very productive and did not make a lot of mistakes. He led them to an athletic American Conference championship. And then he got injured. He was injured, I believe, in the last game of the regular season and got benched for Jennings, which I'm not sure if that was really the right call. But he got Wally pipped essentially. But he comes in, what they need is a stabilizer, and they've not had that with their quarterback rotation. And so it feels to me like, how with Pat Fitzgerald, under Pat Fitzgerald, it seemed like every other year Northwestern was like, they're terrible, they're great again, they're terrible, they're great again. If you look at the trajectory, it's always been based on who's quarterbacking. Like if they have a solid quarterback who can keep them steady, they have a good year. I think Preston Stone is that guy.
Yeah, I thought about putting Preston Stone on my list as well. I obviously did not because I thought there were some other ones, but I'm glad you mentioned him because he's one that I definitely wanted to highlight as well. My final one, and I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball because I started on defense. I figure I'll end here on defense. Andre Jordan Jr. coming in to UCLA from Oregon State. UCLA has quietly had a very good portal cycle for themselves, bringing in a lot of good talent, and Andre Jordan Jr. coming in from Oregon State. He had an excellent season this past year, and one of the things that I liked most about him was that he really wasn't targeted all that often. Less than 40 times, and he played the entire season, less than 40 times was he targeted this season. And oftentimes, if you know anything about cornerback play, if you're targeted less, that typically means you're doing a good job because the guy that you're guarding is not open as much. It's clear when you watch him play, because I did look at a little bit of stuff and I did see him against Oregon. It's clear that he needs more strength. He's just a little too skinny. He's a little too weak right now. But once you get him into a good strength and conditioning program, and if UCLA can make that happen here in the offseason, he can be a much better player. He has the length, he has the speed. He just needs to bulk up a little bit more, get better physically, and I think he can turn into a really good cornerback for UCLA this next year. So
Nice.
all right, Zach, let's hit a commercial and then we'll come back. We'll skip the other two topics, and then we'll get to Notre Dame and Penn State. So everybody, stick with us. We're gonna preview Notre Dame and Penn State next. Well, if I can find my video. There it is. All right. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zach Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we appreciate you being with us. I am going to move myself over here.
I say, where did you go, JR?
Yeah, I can't edit it while the thing is going on, unfortunately. But there we go. All right, we have Penn State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame favored on FanDuel by 1.5 over Penn State in this one. Zach, I got to be honest. Looking at this game, I really do not know who to pick. This is one of those games, and I felt similarly with Ohio State and Oregon, but I still felt better about Ohio State than maybe some other ones. This is honestly the game that honestly I could go either way. If you told me you were picking Penn State, I would 100% say, yep, that makes sense, and I can see them winning the game. If you told me you were picking Notre Dame, I would say, yep, that 100% makes sense, and I can see them winning the game. Like, I'm really not going to have an issue with a lot of the reasoning for picking these two teams. They are so similar in a lot of ways, but there are also some differences that I think are going to be key in this matchup. Zach, tell me what your thought process here is going into this game.
I'll start by just saying, how awesome is it that it's Penn State, Notre Dame, and not Georgia? And I've heard a lot of people say this, but this is like an ode to the 70s and 80s, like blue bloods of the sport. And what a moment for James Franklin and for Marcus Freeman. Like, I know a lot of people give a lot of agita to James Franklin. He's in a semifinal. He's in the Final Four. And like, you can say what you want about the level of competition, but I think we're seeing, like, James Franklin, I think, is moving beyond the plateau by getting here. And I think that's a big deal. So I think this coaching matchup is intriguing because I think the coordinators for both are really, really good. Like, you have Tom Allen, a former head coach on one side. You have Al Golden on the other side. And like, both defensive coordinators are legit good. I mean, they're very good. The offensive coordinators, I think Andy Kotelnicki has been so good for Penn State. Mike Denbrock has been excellent for Notre Dame in maximizing their strengths. And I think there's so many different storylines that you can really tack onto. I think one thing, like, Mike Denbrock knows who Notre Dame is. They're a running team. They want to run you over. They're willing to run their quarterback. They know Riley Leonard's limitations in the passing game. They know their receivers' limitations. They don't have a receiver over 500 yards, right? So they know who they are. Penn State, I still think at times they don't really know who they are offensively. Like, I think Kotelnicki is trying to learn how to help Penn State be aggressive, but sometimes we've seen them be aggressive in wrong spots, right? You go back to the SMU game and they're aggressive. They go for it on fourth down in their own territory. And you're like, what are you doing? I don't really feel like they went for the kill shot at the end of Boise State until late, and I think they're still trying to figure it out. But on the other side, on the flip side, you look at the defenses, like Notre Dame defensively is a monster. They also haven't faced a good passing attack at all this season. Like
Yeah, I mean, they saw Louisville, USC, and Indiana, which we learned Indiana torn ACL for Kurt's work really limited his
yeah,
mobility. Not really an excuse. He
yeah,
still had a very good season, so not using that as an excuse, just pointing it out. And then on top of that, you had USC, who they had a better passing attack, but they also had Jada Mayava in his second game starting, I believe, for
yeah,
USC. Like, that was more difficult. And then Louisville probably Louisville gave them their best game. I'm trying to remember the
yeah.
score of that game.
I misspoke. They've played good offenses. I
Right, but
don't I
you're talking
don't know
about an
if
elite passing attack, like a
yeah,
passing attack where you say this is what this offense is, and they can beat any secondary in the country with it. They have not faced that passing attack this season. You're
yes.
correct.
Right. And while Penn State isn't that, they're they're not that. They do have X factors both at the running back spot and the tight end spot. Like I think Tyler Warren might be the singular best skill position player they have faced all season. And I think the tandem of Katrin Allen and Nick Singleton are the best tandem of backs they've faced all season. And I'm not sure that's that close either. Like I think, Indiana had a good stable of backs. But I think Singleton and Allen are far superior to them. I think they're better than the tandem at Georgia. And from what I saw with Notre Dame and Georgia, the thing that stood out to me, everybody's talking about how really Notre Dame dominated the game. I on one sense I agree, and another sense I don't. Like I watched the game almost from beginning snap to end, and my thought throughout the whole game was these teams are even, and these teams don't scare me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, man, Notre Dame's got 7 days to prep. Which, by the way, prayers up for New Orleans and everything that happened there, and
Yes.
all the scary stuff that happened there. But like
Yes.
Notre Dame has 7 days to rest up from getting beat up physically, whereas Penn State was kind of drinking a latte, going to Dunkin' Donuts, and taking Boise State out back by the woodshed. Like, and they have 9 days to rest. Abdul Carter's going to get healthy. That defensive line's going to get healthy. What's their specialty? Stopping the run. I just think, and I think it's a very even matchup. And I think a lot of people look at Notre Dame and say, I think Notre Dame's going to make the national championship. I'm not sure because I think Penn State matches up really well with them, and they have 2 days extra rest, and they didn't get beat up by Georgia. That feels like a hard combination to overcome, especially with the attrition that Notre Dame's already had to endure. What say you?
Well, yeah, I think that I agree with everybody in the chat who's saying this is a very even matchup. This is going to be a low scoring game. Like I echo a lot of those sentiments. For me, like I have to look at different small areas of where is this team better than the other team. If both teams were fully healthy, I would probably give it to Notre Dame,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Yep.
But some of the injuries that Notre Dame has had has concerned me. Obviously, Riley Mills being one of the biggest ones. But when I look at this Penn State team, I think they have more weapons, and I think that Drew Aller is a better quarterback. I think Notre Dame has a better defense, like it's slightly, like if I had to pick, but they're so even, it's really difficult. I think Notre Dame has a slightly better defense, just because I do think Penn State has some specialty players like an Abdul Carter who struggles a little bit more in stopping the run, but he does an excellent job. Don't get me wrong; he's one of the best pass rushers in the country, but overall, I think that Penn State has those playmakers on offense and defense with their specialties to get them the win, right? Talking about Abdul Carter, even though I did knock him for some of the run defense, I think he has that specialty of the pass rush that is going to be so integral in this game, and putting Riley Leonard in bad situations. I think Tyler Warren has that piece of his game that is so integral for the tight end position where he can just do anything. Like, you can see Tyler Warren playing any position on offense. He has played center, he has played tight end, he has played wide receiver, he's played running back, he's played quarterback. He has done all of these things. And so Andy Kotelnicki has the ultimate wild card in his hand to say, I will do whatever I want with this player, and you cannot stop him. It does not matter what I want to do. I have him, and you cannot stop him. Same thing with the running back duo that you mentioned, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. I mean, I said it before the Boise State game. These two would remind people why they are one of the best, if not the best, running back duos in the country. Now, I think there's another one or two that's better, but I can definitely hear an argument for Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen being the best running back duo in the country. And I look at all that and say, but will Andy Kotelnicki get too cute? Because that's kind of what he did a little bit against Boise State.
Yep.
And I know that there's some thought process there of like, well, the play calling wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad, right? We're not sitting here saying, oh, the play calling was awful or anything like that. A lot of it was you want to run Katron Allen because the safeties were coming up. I mean, I get it, but then you also want to throw over the top. I felt like you had so much success as Penn State with such a high lead that you could have just kept running Katron Allen. But I also get where Andy Kotelnicki was coming from. So I look at this, I say both teams have excellent offensive and defensive coordinators. Both teams have excellent coaches in my mind. I think James Franklin gets far too much hate for what he's done and losing some games to Michigan and Ohio State. I think he gets far too much hate for that. I think that James Franklin is proving in the college football playoffs that he is a better coach than people give him credit for. And I don't know if I buy into the Georgia stuff, playing Georgia, being less beat up as much as you do. I'm definitely not saying it's not a thing. I'm just saying I don't know if I buy into it as much as you do. But every time I look at this game and say, what is this going to come down to? I say Penn State just has better players in my mind. And so in this game, if I'm thinking who has the better players, I'm not thinking about coaching or anything like that. I'm just thinking who has the better players. I think Penn State does. And I think that's where I'm going to lean on picking this game.
Yeah. I think for me, the beat upness, like I think the defense, I think it might show up there, like in trying to stop Penn State's run game, particularly with Riley Mills out. But I think where it's really going to hurt them is Jeremiah Love has been playing hurt, who I think is the most dynamic player on Notre Dame's offense. And if he is not 100%, it's like, well, Kadarian Price is like, he's dynamic too. And Riley Leonard will move the chains as a runner. Like, he was very effective against Georgia. And I think he will run at least 10 to 15 times against Penn State. Like that, like that is part of their recipe for success. But I question how effective that's going to be when Penn State has experience in playing more dynamic offenses and trying to shut them down. Like, we talked about who Notre Dame has played. Well, Penn State's also had to play USC, and they played him when Miller Moss was playing. Right. And it's like Miller Moss was working well in that system. I still think they pulled the trigger on Mayava too early, but they've played Ohio State. They've played Oregon. And while the Oregon game, you might say, well, Oregon scored 45 points, but also they had some big stops in that game, right? Like it wasn't all domination by Oregon's offense. And regardless of what you think about the Rose Bowl, Penn State, Oregon's offense is one of the most effective offenses and one of the most high flying offenses in the country. And Penn State had to play them. I just don't see the weaponry for Notre Dame to be able to go, And while I think their offensive line has really risen to the occasion, I think their defensive line has really risen to the occasion. I think Penn State's going to be able to do things that affect Notre Dame enough where they can get a close win. I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be an excellent game. And I think my one fear for Penn State is while I do think James Franklin, I think he's appropriately rated. I don't think he's overrated. I don't think he's underrated. I think we are starting to see just how darn good Marcus Freeman is as a coach. Like he outcoached Kirby Smart. Like just flat out outcoached him. And I think that's on the table that if Notre Dame wins this game, it's because Marcus Freeman, again, has a Jim Tressel-esque coaching performance with special teams and with play calls, coaching decisions. Like, I think that's on the table, and that's nothing against James Franklin. I just think Marcus Freeman, we're seeing how great he is as a coach. But I think your comment about players matters. And I think Penn State I think they can match the lines, and I think they have the more explosive players. And so I'm going 20-16. And I think Notre Dame has a shot to win it at the end, but ultimately there's a big sack by Abdul Carter or Denai Dennis Sutton that really ends the game.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree. I was gonna say 17-13 Penn State in this one. I think Penn State has more opportunities to move the ball. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to disrespect Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame, their win against Georgia was huge. I think that Marcus Freeman coached like crazy in that one and did a very good job. But again, you look at the weapons that Penn State has: Tyler Warren, Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. And I do think their wide receivers have improved. I don't think you see the gaudy numbers, but I do feel like ever since that Ohio State game, I really do feel like their wide receivers have been getting better. Like I said, you're not going to see the gaudy numbers, but you saw in that Oregon game, the wide receivers get down the field more, and Andy Kotelnicki trusting them more. You saw in that Boise State game, Andy Kotelnicki was trusting the wide receivers down the field more. Now, did they always deliver? No. I mean, they're not perfect, and they aren't one of the best wide receiver corps in the country. That's not what I'm saying, but I think they're getting better. And so for me, I'm going to go with this one. Penn State 17, Notre Dame 13. I think if Notre Dame gets some kind of special team score, blocked punt or something like that, that will be the difference. That will be what wins them the game. I think if you see a late game block punt or something, I think Notre Dame could win this game 20-17 or whatever. But I think if Penn State plays clean ball, if Penn State plays to their strengths and, does a good job, and I don't think the pass rush will be completely irrelevant. I see what some people, I forget who it was in the chat, somebody said sit Carter and put in a bigger body. I still think you need Carter in the game, and it does sound like he's going to play in this game based on James Franklin and what he had to say, because in the game against against Georgia, Riley Leonard still dropped back to pass 30 times in that game. Yeah. So, I mean, he only threw the ball 24 times, but he dropped back to pass 29 times. I apologize, 29, not 30. So there's going to be opportunities to sack the quarterback. And even on that first drive for Notre Dame, they were dropping Riley Leonard back more than I felt like they should. Now, they had some negative plays to contribute to that, so I get it. But still, I don't think Notre Dame has that offense to get out of I forget what it was, like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 or something like that to do that. And you knew Georgia's offense wasn't good enough to move the ball on your defense consistently. So just punt the ball away and play the field position battle, which, I'm not going to fault too much because I do think that being aggressive works out well. But yeah, so we're both picking Penn State you picked them by 4, and I picked them by 4.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, PSU Jim, he says 30 dropbacks and only 90 yards passing. Yeah, I have PFF pulled up. He had a 56 passing grade in that Georgia game, which is not very good. And don't get me wrong, he has had some good games passing this year, so I'm not trying to completely, talk bad about Riley Leonard. And I do like Riley Leonard. That's the thing too. I like him as a player. He did a good job passing with his PFF grade against Florida State and Navy. He actually came on pretty well against Indiana as a passer too. So
Yep.
But yeah, Georgia really got after him, and I think Penn State can do the same thing.
Yeah. I think it's just important to note though, like, cause I think people look at the stats and are like, oh, Notre Dame's trash. And or Riley Leonard, how could he only throw for 90 yards? I think you do have to remember, in a lot of ways, I think Marcus Freeman is a lot like Jim Tressel. And remember that, for those of you who are really young, you probably don't remember 2002 when they won the national championship. Craig Krenzel went what 7 of 21, like threw for like 80 yards in that game, but like his legs were the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a lot of ways, like that's how Notre Dame's going to win games. And so we're both picking Penn State because we think that they're a little bit more explosive. But and I say like big but here. Notre Dame winning this game will not shock me at all. And it would not shock me even if they have under 100 passing yards again. Cuz like that's how they're going to win. They're going to win by moving the ball, by playing smart, by winning the turnover battle with special teams. So like don't like we can't be stat gazers on this. Like
Right.
but I do think Penn State presents challenges that Georgia didn't, which is surprising to say. But
yeah. And I think you make an excellent point about the running quarterbacks. Like it is proven that when a quarterback gets hit more, they have a tougher time throwing the ball, being accurate, like all those things. So, that's one of the reasons why a lot of coaches don't want their quarterback running at all because they know it takes away from the passing game. But, Marcus Freeman obviously is okay with that happening because he recognizes the benefit of Riley Leonard as a runner. And, he also, I assume, I don't have Marcus Freeman on the record saying this, but I could assume that he probably doesn't think that Riley Leonard is going to win him a college football playoff game with his arm. He might, but I just wouldn't bet on it happening. Like, it's one of those things where it's like he could, but I'm not gonna. Yeah. John says 23-20 Notre Dame. I really don't know who to pick. This is just such a pure guess. It really can go either way. I'm with you, John. I think it can. And also too, this is a game I think a blowout by Penn State is more likely than a blowout by Notre Dame. Would you agree with that? I wouldn't pick it, but I could see Penn State winning 31-17 or something like that.
So I'll push back a little bit because I think there's a world where Penn State actually shoots themselves in the foot with turnovers, and it could avalanche on them pretty bad.
That's possible. That's possible. I really like this answer from Johar. Perpetual wrong person, Paul Feinbaum picked Notre Dame, so I'll take Penn State by at least 10. That's some good thought process there, Joe. Mr. Bucknuts says, I got Penn State 27-23. I think that's a good pick. I think that's a good pick. So a little more scoring than I got, but yeah, we'll see. It could happen. It could definitely happen. All right, Zach, you want to talk about Ohio State, Texas?
Nah, who cares about that game? Yes, let's do it.
Too bad. We're doing it anyway. Ohio State is favored by 5.5 over Texas. The over-under in this game is 53.5. Ohio State obviously has looked very impressive in their 2 playoff games so far against Tennessee at home and then Oregon on the road in the Rose Bowl, which felt like more of a home game. Would you agree there were more Oregon fans there than Ohio State fans?
It wasn't that pronounced. I'd say probably 6. It's funny. I texted you early on. I'm like, there's a lot of Oregon fans here. It really turned out to probably 60-40 or 55-45. It wasn't that big of a disparity.
Maybe the Ohio State fans just got there late. They didn't want to pay for as much hotel.
Yeah. Did we make it?
Yeah. Well, apparently Ohio State has sold out its allotment for this Texas game, so I know there's a number of people concerned about that. But I think that this should be a fairly even crowd for Ohio State, Texas again. And when I say fairly even, I mean somewhere in between like 60-40 or something like that. I don't think Ohio State will be the predominant crowd in Texas against Texas. But yeah, overall, like this is a very interesting game, right? You have Texas, who has Quinn Ewers, who was such a highly rated prospect. Quinn Ewers, who actually spent a year, not even a year, like 4 or 5 months at Ohio State, with him coming in the summer for joining the team, and then he left like that December. So like I said, like 5 6 months maybe with Ohio State for that time. He transfers to Texas, gets the starting role right away, and then from there, this Texas team you thought was going to have the best offense. You had Steve Sarkisian, you had Quinn Ewers, and they've had very good offenses. Don't get me wrong, but I would say that they've underwhelmed a little bit, and I'm surprised that a Steve Sarkisian team is so led by the defense, right? I mean, this Texas
Yeah.
team is led by the defense. Now, they did give up a 16-point lead to Arizona State, but I give a lot of credit to Arizona State in that one and just how much they tired out Texas's defense and how much they kept going after them. But this Texas defense and this Ohio State defense is going to battle here for who is the best defense in the country, in my mind. I give the edge to Ohio State because I believe they faced better competition. But Zach, let me ask you this: which defense do you think is better? And then what are your thoughts on the game?
So I'm gonna go to hypothetical land for a minute, and then I'll bring us back to reality.
Okay.
Because the SEC loves to deal in hypothetical, right?
Yes.
So,
and the SEC will win the hypothetical portion of the
all the time
preview.
But here's the reason why I want to do this is I think if you were to break this down from like NCAA college football 25 ratings of every player, and you simulated it, I think they're almost dead even, and I would say Texas, I think in some ways you could say is even better than Ohio State. And I think that's not just true defensively. I think that's true on offense too.
Yeah.
I think their secondary is really, really good. Barron, the Thorpe Award winner, is a really good corner.
This is the best safety matchup of the season.
Yes.
Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom versus Baring and I forget the other safety's name. I apologize.
Makuba.
That's right.
Yeah.
I knew it was something kind of funny.
Yeah.
I like that name. Makuba.
Yeah. Well, it's Taff and Makuba are the safeties. Barron's right. the corner. Makuba, he's transferred in from Clemson.
Yeah.
They're good on every level of defense. Like Anthony Hill, stud linebacker. Simmons, who won Freshman of the Year in the country, coming off the edge. Like their defensive line's legit. And so if you're just looking at pure talent, I'm like, yeah, I think Texas, like I think they're dead even. If I look at what they've actually done, and this is going to be a trend in how I break down this game, the way Ohio State's played the past 2 weeks, there's not a defense that matches them in the country. And it's by far. Like by far. Like I thought Texas struggled in the pass game against Clemson. And while I think Klubnik and those receivers are good, they don't present anything like what Ohio State presents with the receivers and the running backs. I thought ASU bullied them a little bit, especially in the second half. And not that I want Ohio State to go bully ball, because we all know what happens when that happens. They have shown that against good teams, there are cracks in that defense, which is hard to understand because this is how I would then speak about Texas. I feel like Texas is Ohio State pre-Michigan, where the defense is good, they're rock solid, and they have some wow plays. But I'm like, when are they going to get it really together? Whereas Ohio State's gotten it together. And the way that they're deploying downs kind of in the middle of that defense, I mean, it's a game changer. Mm-hmm. I mean, and
when you
They
hear people describe this defense, you're hearing people say like, "Oh, this is a 4-2-5, three high safety check, round robin, this, that, and the other." It's like they have to have like four or five terms in there because Jim Knowles is putting so many different things together to make this defense what it is. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of, in particular Tennessee and Oregon are having such a hard time with it because you're correct. Ohio State has moved their safety Caleb Downs down to more of a hybrid safety linebacker role, and it has completely changed the defense for the better.
yeah. And then what it's done is it's unleashed it's allowed them to play aggressive but almost safe on the back end. And so guys aren't open, and it's allowing that front to get pressure just with four. Which then, so I look at at both defenses. I think Ohio State's defense is playing far superior, and I don't mean just from a schematic standpoint either. They are laying the wood. I mean, they are hurting people. Like Jordan James went out of that game early.
Yeah.
Lathan Ransom was trucking that dude. And I mean, again, I was at the stadium. You could hear it on the TV. You could hear it live, how hard they were hitting. And that's been the case against Tennessee, against Oregon. And so for me, the key is, does Ohio State continue to play and escalate? And can Texas kind of get to that level? Because they can. Like, I think Texas, out of any team in this tournament, has the talent. I think we both said Ohio State and Oregon, I think, are the two best teams. But Texas can get there. And that's the problem as I think about this game, is I'm like, Texas can get there, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've listened to a couple Texas podcasts and I've watched a couple Texas games just because we had the time. Fortunately, we did not have a preview just the day after. Sometimes I don't always get to do as much research as I'd like with us doing previews on Sundays, sometime or on Tuesdays with only a couple days. But we've had more time, so I appreciate that I was able to do that. And what I've noticed from this Texas team is they do get tired, which is interesting because they do play like 6 or 7 deep on their defensive line. You wouldn't think they would get so tired, but they do. Oftentimes in late game situations, they're kind of running with the same guys, and so it does make them a little bit more tired. I think that the safeties are a huge part of this defense. Obviously, they're one of the best safety duos in the nation, but you also see them having to take on so many responsibilities. I think Chip Kelly is going to figure out where are the safeties, and that's how I will attack this defense. That will ultimately come down to then the pass rush and the run defense from the Texas defensive line. I mean, this has pretty much been the talking point for Ohio State in the playoffs every single time, and it's every single time because it really is what will lead this team to victory or not. Can the offensive line hold up? One of the reasons why Ohio State is hitting the deep balls against Oregon and Tennessee that they were not able to hit against Michigan is because the offensive line has been holding up. The middle of that offensive line was caving in anytime they ran the ball, anytime they passed the ball against Michigan. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant were on another level, and they're already first-round picks. If Texas can't get pressure up the middle and completely cave in the offensive line like Michigan did, you don't see really a path for them to stop this Ohio State offense, because if you let Jeremiah Smith run down the field, he will get open eventually, and Will Howard will find him. Even if he's not open, Will Howard will just throw it up there, and Jeremiah Smith will go up and get it. Jeremiah Smith is turning into the best wide receiver in all of college football right now. And I'm not trying to sound like a homer saying that. I'm genuinely saying there are not many guys who can go into double coverage, jump up multiple times this season, and catch the ball with one hand or two hands. I mean, there's just not really anybody else in college football that can do that. That also has his speed, his size, and everything else. On the flip side, from watching Texas this year, the biggest thing I've come away with, obviously on the offensive side of the ball, is they do struggle to run the ball if they're going up against a good run defense. But also with Quinn Ewers, what I wasn't expecting to see that I did see more of is that he really is not able to create. He is
Mhm.
much more of I don't think it makes him a game manager, but I just from what I saw, if the play design is not working, Quinn Ewers will most likely get sacked or panic and make a bad decision. One of those
Yep.
two things oftentimes happens. Now that does not happen very often because Steve Sarkisian really is a genius when it comes to offense, and he has some of the best play calling out there. But he also is a head coach who's trying to manage that, and Ohio State fans know how head coach trying to manage play calling and head coaching responsibilities can be a difficult thing. So I say all this to say that Ohio State on defense, if they can confuse Steve Sarkisian and get Quinn Ewers off what the game plan is, Ohio State's defense will keep Texas to less than 17 points in this
Mhm.
game. If they cannot do that and Steve Sarkisian can really dial some stuff up, I could see Texas scoring 28, but without a really good run game, I don't think you're going to score more than 28 on this Ohio State defense. So for me, if Ohio State gets 30 in this game, that's enough. I don't think that's a guarantee, but I do think it's likely based off the Ohio State offense that we've seen.
Yeah.
So my score prediction overall will be not a blowout, but a bigger win for Ohio State. I think it will remain close for a good amount of the game. I don't think Ohio State will come out and have the offensive explosion that we've seen where they just get up 34 to nothing. I do think you'll see some good offense from Ohio State, so they will be up, and I think Texas will kind of hang around with them, but I think eventually Ohio State will pull away, and Ohio State will win this one 31 to 17.
Man, do you know how close our scores are?
What do you got?
31-16.
How did they get to 16? What's your thought process there?
I just don't. I think they're going to struggle to score in the red zone,
Okay.
and I
Yeah,
think
that
it'll
makes
be
sense.
like I could see it like 13-10 at half, like Ohio State trailing. Because here's my question for you, Jr. Out of all the defensive lines that they've faced, like who do you think? How would you rank them? Like, but Michigan, Tennessee, Texas, Oregon, Penn State. Like, how would you rank those 5 defensive lines
Okay, so
that they've
Oregon, Penn
faced?
State, Texas, and who else?
Tennessee and Penn State.
Oh boy. I would say from playing them, I mean, I do hold Oregon in high regard because of what they were able to do in that first game, but they did nothing in the second game. So that's really hard to try and engage there. We haven't faced Texas yet, but I tend to believe Texas is the best just because of how much depth they have. But I also said Tennessee was one of the best defensive lines in the nation, and then we played them, and it was like, well, they're not really all that good.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like I hold Texas in higher regard, but if I watch Texas defensive line do nothing against Ohio State, then I'll be like, well, yeah, they weren't all that good. So I think at the end of the day, I think Michigan's is the best defensive line in all of college football, or one of the best in all of college football. I think
Yeah.
Ohio State is the best with the way they're playing right now, but I don't think they showed that all season. I don't think I would have Ohio State fans argue with me on that. Like I said, right now, they're the best. All season long, they didn't show they were the best. I think next after them would probably be Penn State, just because of what Abdul Carter brings. I would have said Tennessee, but James Pierce Jr. did not show me anything in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first round pick, big guy, that was going to kind of star that defensive line. He didn't do anything for him. So I'm actually going to put Tennessee last.
Yeah.
So I'll go Michigan, Penn State, Texas, just kind of neutral on them because we haven't faced them yet. Oregon, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So a couple things. One, I think Donovan Jackson might be the unsung hero of Ohio State. The way he's
definitely is.
played at left tackle.
Yeah.
He moved over like 0 pressures against Oregon, and they had Jordan Birch back. So like as much as people talk about Evan Stewart being out and Jordan James getting knocked out of the game, their defense was fully loaded and they looked like they had emptied the clip pregame.
Yeah.
I mean, they did not know what hit them. So here's my dilemma. And I already said my score 31-16, but here's my concern is that I do think Texas along the lines could give Ohio State problems. Like, I think this is hypothetically, again, keyword hypothetically, Texas's offensive line is the best offensive line they faced just from pure talent. Like Banks, Williams at the tackles, their center, like they're all top 3 round grades. Banks is probably the best offensive tackle in the draft. Williams is probably a first round tackle. The center is probably a top 3 round guy. So like really, really good offensive line personnel. But again, in the games that have mattered, they haven't shown it. Like against Georgia, the first time against Georgia at home, and they had their whole line healthy, I believe. They looked awful. And it's like, what in the world? And so my question is, okay, will the real Texas stand up? And
that was the same question that Ohio State had at the beginning of the playoffs.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and so that's my dilemma is I think there is something on the table where Texas wakes up and they play to their talent level and they can beat Ohio State. Like, I think that's very much on the table. And if they give Ewers time and they can turn over Will Howard, like, I think Texas can win. I think they could win big. But
it would take a collapse by Ohio State for Texas to win big. Here's where I'm at with this Ohio State team, and I know everybody is picking, pretty much everybody is picking Ohio State to win big, and I believe Ohio State will win by more than one score. But, and I was talking with a buddy about this the other day, like Ohio State could simultaneously be remembered as, if they win the national championship, they could be remembered as having the ceiling as one of the best to ever win a national championship in the college football playoff era, and then also having the floor of one of the worst. Because that's what they have shown this season. Against Michigan, they showed one of the worst performances of a national title contender that we've seen in the college football playoff era. And then against Oregon, you saw one of the best in the college football playoff era. So it's this crazy dichotomy where at the end of the day, Ohio State has what I believe is the most talented roster in college football.
Yep.
But do they have the coaches who are putting them in the best position to do that? I believe they do now. But I also thought they were doing a good job going into the Michigan game. So I think what it comes down to is I think Ryan Day just has a Michigan problem. I think that he is aggressive, and I think Chip Kelly is helping him be aggressive in these playoff games. That's why I feel confident in Ohio State to win the game. But if they come out and Ohio State loses this game 17-10, I would not be surprised at all. If the defense shows up but the offense does not show up, I would not be surprised at all. I would hate it, but I would come back and I would say, yeah, that's what we saw against Michigan, and it happened again.
Yep. Yeah. And I think of all the teams that they could face, this is the one team that could make them pay for that.
Right.
So,
and I agree with you, Mr. Bucknuts. He says, doubt it, Natty on the line. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen. Like I said, it has the possibility of happening. That's how Texas wins, is Ohio State beats themselves.
Yeah.
And I know that's a huge homer take, but I don't see how.
Well,
how Texas wins other than that.
The one pushback I would use, if Texas can turn it on like Ohio State, they have the personnel to do it. And now, that being said, and this is why I'm going Ohio State by double digits, Texas has not seen personnel like Ohio State's all year. Like, particularly the offense. They have not faced a good offense. Yeah, we talk about Notre Dame not facing a good offense. Texas has not faced a good offense at all.
Right.
Like Georgia is probably the best offense they've faced. Woof. Like
Yeah. And that's
it's
the other thing that I look to with all of this is Ohio State has been battle tested this season. You can say whatever you want about Indiana and everything else. The truth is Indiana won a lot of games this season and they lost to Ohio State by a lot of points when they were at peak confidence, right? Um, you can say all you want about James Franklin and Penn State and everything. The truth is that in the semifinals and the Final Four, Penn State is there and Ohio State beat them earlier this season. You can say all you want about the rest and everything else about Oregon, but the fact is that Oregon was the best team in college football in the regular season, and Ohio State trounced them. I mean,
yep.
Ohio State is the most battle tested team that's left in the playoffs, and Texas is probably the least.
Yep. Yeah.
So
agreed.
it's very interesting. Very interesting. Let's see some of the other people's scores. Hold on really fast. Tyler has a question. He says, Zach, do you think they can keep up with us offensively from what you've seen? I don't think so. I think he's asking if they get into a shootout, if Texas could keep up with Ohio State offensively.
The one way is if that offensive line plays up to their potential. Because if they can run the ball and they can do play action.
Do that against Clemson, but Clemson's also a bad run defense.
Awful. But and again, it's a lot of ifs. I think Bootzilla was like, it's a lot of ifs. It is a lot of ifs. But
right.
Again, I think Texas, the high end of Texas is good enough to beat Ohio State. The problem is we have not seen it all year. And
right.
I think that's where we've seen the high end of Ohio State now, but I think if they played to their potential, they have really good receivers, in Bond and Bolden, what's the other guy? Their number one receiver. They have
They have Bonds, Bolden, Wingo,
Ryan Wingo, and their running backs, it's their fourth and fifth string, but they have been serviceable. And if their offensive line blocks, they can do some business there. They have a good tight end in Gunnar Helm. The issue though is they have not, and we saw it against Arizona State. They have not played like it. Arizona State's good, but they're a top 10, 12 team. They're not an elite team. Mm-hmm. And honestly, Texas is lucky that they had special teams in their favor. And even that wasn't in their favor late in the game because of the missed kicks. But yeah. At the end of the day, potentially, hypothetically, yes. But realistically, unless they turn it on, no.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Texas's best could beat Ohio State, but I also think if Ohio State is at their best, nobody's beating them.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, again, that could be a homer take, but that's what I think. David Greenshield is here. He says, hey guys, hey David, we're about at the end of the show, but we appreciate you being here. Put your score prediction in the chat, David. I'm going to run through some people's score predictions here. If anybody else has a score prediction, please put it in the chat, and I'd love to see what you guys think. So Mr. Bucknuts says 34-17. OSU, me and Mr. Bucknuts are right there, and you as well, about the same. PSU Jim, 34-20. OSU wins it. PSU Jim's thinking like us. Philip says 48-7 OSU. Yeah, I will be far too confident if that happens. Tyler says 41-17 Bucks W. The thing is, Zach, I know sometimes fans will say this, these kind of scores, kind of like trolling, yeah, we're going to kill you. It's not trolling. It really could happen.
Yeah.
Ohio State could win this game 41-17.
Yeah.
College football 360 says Ohio State 34 to Texas 24. That's also a possibility. I think that's a good thought process there. And then Troy V says Buckeyes squeak it out 45 to 13. Yeah. Just a little squeak out there.
Can I add one thing to that? What you just said.
One second. Let me get the rest of the predictions. John says 45-21. Bootzilla says 31-17. You're like me, Bootzilla. I like it. Doug says 38-13 Ohio State. Yes, what did you want to say, Zach?
So I've been trying to hold back the reins and give Texas a lot of chance to win because I do think
Well, it
they
wouldn't be
have
a
the
preview
talent.
if we just came out here and
Yeah.
said like, "Hey, Ohio State rocks, Texas sucks." Like,
Yeah.
and trust me, I've watched some previews like that the past few days. They're not
Yeah.
very fun.
No. But here's to your point about the 48-7 thing. The way Texas is playing right now and their strengths and weaknesses compared to Ohio State's strengths and weaknesses, I do think it's on the table that Ohio State shuts out Texas and it's like a 49-0 game. I don't think that'll happen. I think Texas has too much pride. And I think Texas, they're going to want to get up for this game. I really believe that. But if you look at how Ohio State's defense is constructed, it matches what Texas wants to do.
Right.
And if you look at Ohio State's offense, like I think Texas' defense is really good, but I also think I thought Oregon's defense was really good. And I mean, they made it the first 29 minutes of that game. Ohio State made Oregon look like Western Michigan. And I just don't. There is a potential for Texas to get overwhelmed because they have not seen anything like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is what justifies the 41-17, the 48-7. And I know we did our preview on Texas, Arizona State, and something you said really got a whole lot of Texas fans all riled up because they said, there's no way Arizona State's even coming close within us, and we're going to destroy them. And, I was one that said 0 ranked wins, and they obviously took
Offense to
took a
that.
problem with that. And I'm sure there will be more Texas fans that watch this because we put our previews out as individual videos, and they will probably not like me saying, Texas, you've not played anybody this season until the playoffs. And even in the playoffs, you played Clemson, which was not all that good, and Arizona State, who was very motivated, but let's be honest, they should not have been anywhere near the talent level of what Texas is with how they've been able to recruit. And so at the end of the day, Texas is going to have to put together their absolute best performance they've seen all season. It's always possible, but and for the record, me doubting you does not mean Ohio State is doubting you.
Yeah. If Ohio State drinks the Kool-Aid, they will get beat. But I don't think they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
I can't imagine they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Vince says, how much does OSU have to be up for Texas to turn to Arch? 3 scores. I think if Ohio State goes up 3 scores, they'll go to Arch. I think they give Quinn 3 drives. If they don't score a single point, and a couple of those are 3 and outs, and Ohio State's up 21-0, 17-0, I think they go to Arch.
That's when the avalanche could happen, though.
I mean, because maybe Arch might be better.
I was reading some stuff on this. I think Arch, his tools might be better, but does he know the offense as well? Does he know when to check?
He's been there for 2 years. He should. It's not like he's a true freshman this year, but no, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. We've talked this game to death. Anything else? At this point, we're talking about what happens for the backup quarterback to get in one of the teams.
Which is, it might be a little disrespectful. I want to put it out there. I think there's potential for a blowout for Ohio State, but I think if you're an Ohio State fan and you're like, Texas has no shot, like, just understand, out of any team in the playoff, including Oregon, Texas has the talent to compete, but also it is not a good matchup for Texas.
Yeah, it's not. So I think you make good points. Good points. All right. And yes, Philip, I was not trying to disrespect Scadaboo, which I don't even know. Is that how you spell his name? I've never been able to spell it.
It's, I think there's an E in there.
I thought it was like B-O. Maybe it is B-O-O. I don't know. Philip might have used the spell check. He might not have. Or the spell check didn't help him at all. There are names like that. So, all right. Well, Zach, I think we put in a good day's work here. I will move myself back over here so that way I'm not hiding behind the scoreboard. Got anything else you want to get to before we get out of here?
No, it's crazy that season's almost over. So
It is. It is. But just because the season ends does not mean the podcast ends. So stay with us in the off season. We typically, stay pretty well locked in on the topics and stuff like that. But you know, by uh, by April, don't be surprised if there's a, Big Ten coaches power ranking wrestler matchups and stuff because in the off season sometimes there's a little bit less to talk about. So you know, Zach and I might start choosing between who's going to win in a wrestling match, Luke Fickle or Brett Bielema.
oh my gosh. It's gotta be Fick because he was a wrestler.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know. I got confidence in Brett. I feel like he could do something.
That might be like the championship
He's so
match.
underrated. He's so underrated. Zach.
That's true. That's true. That might be the title match. Fickle versus could you imagine if Vrabel ended up in the Big Ten and he was thrown into this? Like he might bite an ear off.
Yeah, he might. He really
That would
might.
be bad.
Programming note. I don't know what's gonna happen with the power rankings episode tomorrow. I really want to do the power rankings episode, but my kids are one of my kids. My other one is not old enough for school, but one of my kids is off school, and my wife is a school teacher, and they were supposed to go into work for teacher work day, but now they're not. So now she has meetings all day. She has to be on her computer to do so, and I just don't know if I can do a power rankings podcast while I got kids playing in my playroom. So I don't know. Maybe I can do it. But I will try to figure something out with Kent tomorrow for the power rankings episode. It probably will not be at 10 a.m. But just check back. I don't know. We might even do it Monday night. We'll see. But I'm gonna do my best to try and get that to happen. But Zach will not be with us Tuesday night. If, at the very least, I will do something, even if it's by myself Tuesday night. So we'll make sure we have an episode for you then. But Zach, any last things before we get out of here?
Nope. Glad to be with you guys. Thanks for letting us invade your Sunday night. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on the Big Ten Huddle.